It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
Hey, welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club. I'm your host, Michael McMillan, and this is your other host.
I'm Bryce Johnson.
And we're just listening to the intro with our guest, who we'll introduce in a moment. But I'm realizing that Pete Gardner, who's the voice of our Sasquatch in the opening, I think is not so subtly trolling us in our own...
It's a lot.
Our own introduction.
It's an awful lot.
Oh, boy. Well, we have a fantastic guest today. We're finally arriving as a podcast because we have Paul F. Tompkins with us in the studio. Hi, Paul.
Hi, everybody.
I'm not going to keep you away from the listeners any longer. We're going to jump right in and
They want to get at me.
So, how are you, Paul?
I really enjoy that intro.
It's pretty fun, right?
I like that. Sasquatch has an evil laugh.
Yeah.
And then also he knows some ghost stories.
I'm not sure Pete understands the character of Sasquatch, but he's bringing some of his own flavor to it, which I really like. When Riley, our sound engineer, hi, Riley. He's waving at everybody. When he sent that to me, I was like, I don't know. But then I listened to it again, and I was like...
It grows on you fast.
Oh, this for sure. And I could tell Riley was like, I don't know if you're going to like this.
Right. Sometimes if it feels wrong, you know it's right.
Did Pete send this in?
No, he was our first guest.
And you were not here for when he recorded
No. So we already had the music, which is provided by a band named Suneaters from Lotuspool Records. It's I gotta tell you a secret. It's my brother-in-law's band.
Oh, Jesus.
Which I love this music, and I asked him give us something a little spooky and fun with a little, with like a good rock kick to it.
Right.
Because that's what I call a rock kick. And Pete was here, and I don't know, before he left, I go, hey, just can you just, because he was doing
off the cuff.
He was doing off, I was about to say offline, but off mic, he was doing like a Bigfoot voice, and we're like, hey, do that, and
that sounded real.
We might use it.
Let's use that.
Let's just do this. That's what he would sound like.
Right.
So then that's how we have our intro.
But you watched him say those things.
At the time, it just seemed innocuous.
All right. But we didn't know if we were going to use... Yeah, we were just like, this is funny.
Yeah.
And now we realize he was just completely making fun of us.
He's making a mockery of the whole proceedings. Yeah,
I know. I am worried that people who are tuning into this... Because, we like to have fun on the show, but some people I think we might be pissing off already.
Oh,
so
man,
for all
for
of
sure.
you real enthusiasts, here's how it goes. Bryce is more intense about any of this than any of you, okay?
Oh, no.
Bryce,
Don't put that on me.
But Bryce believes the weirdest shit, and it's great, and I'm here because I'm open to all of it, and I do actually agree with you 75 to 80% of the time.
Cool.
So listen,
high percentage.
Yeah.
we're really into this stuff, okay? We might get some of the facts wrong. You might be, yelling at us because we don't know our stuff, but listen, we're into it.
Yeah.
Bryce has a real plaster Bigfoot cast. Come on.
We're just a couple guys hanging out in the clubhouse here.
Yeah, that's right. Hey,
that's all.
It's just clubhouse talk.
Just tell some stories.
So, Paul, what is your personal paranormal history?
It's very limited, and I can't remember how old I was. I want to say, like I was in grade school. I was, I wasn't like a toddler or anything, but I remember being in my bed. Maybe I was in like 5th grade, 6th grade, or something like that, and looking out at the night sky through the window, and I saw what just looked like another star moving in like very specific ways, like kind of sliding down, then over, then across, and I felt like, well, I'm looking at a UFO, that's all it did. And that was it. And I remember telling my mom the next day, and she was surprisingly supportive is not the right word, but like she didn't talk me out of it. She didn't say no, it was probably this. Yeah. She was like, oh, really?
And from what I understand, your mom was pretty religious Catholic, correct?
For a while, until she wasn't religious at all anymore.
Got it.
Yes.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, you're in good company. I mean, so many people have seen stuff like that. And I'm looking up at the night sky all the time, and when the first thing I'll look for is it moving straight, Does it seem normal? And can I explain it pretty relatively easily?
Right.
99% of the times, it's yes. It's when what you described, when they start moving in patterns that kind of defy the laws of physics. Then you have to start asking, like, well, that's not a satellite. That's not a star.
Yeah.
That's not haze or gas.
For sure. It definitely did not seem like a natural phenomenon. Now, this is so long ago, and I can still see that in my mind very vividly, but I couldn't tell you, did I dream that? Was I actually seeing that? Was I in that weird in-between state of sleep and awake? And,
Sleep paralysis.
But I remember it being at night, and I remember telling the story the next day.
And
That's important.
Did the light have like a different color of any kind, or was it just like a starlight?
Not really. It was just like a starlight,
So I was in Sedona, Arizona, which we've touched upon a little bit, and we should probably dedicate a whole episode to Sedona at some point, because
Sure.
it's a town where weird stuff happens.
Hotspot.
Good wine, too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great wine.
Good
Well,
wine.
and Jerome nearby is supposed to be super haunted too. So there's like that whole pocket. It's another one of those weird areas. But I was sitting out. I was there with my family, and my aunt and my cousin had already gone to bed, and I was sitting outside with family friends. And we were just sitting out, drinking wine, talking, looking at the stars. We were sitting on a sort of a hillside where you could kind of oversee the mountain range that is the backdrop to the little downtown area. And out of the corner of my eye, this bright light came out, and I expected to turn my head and see a helicopter, because it was that kind of intense bright. It's like when a helicopter spotlight, when you're being chased by the police,
Sure.
and you're doomed
We
because
live in
the
LA.
helicopter spotlight is beaming down on you. It was like that. And one of the two friends, Gigi, she turned and saw it too, just in time to watch it shrink down.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up near a small airport that flew out private planes and some, that wasn't commercial. And so I was used to, as a kid, watching planes land over the field next to my house. So you can tell if it's got the FAA regulated lights and the blinking red lights and all this stuff. This thing didn't have anything like that. And the night sky was big enough you could point out the other airplanes in the sky. So this thing did what Paul was talking about. It shrunk down, and then we watched it as it
Paul's
went.
didn't shrink.
Well, it was like
Yours shrunk.
Mine shrunk, but
To the size of the thing
to
that
the
I
size
saw.
of the thing. It looked like
I'm just
another.
kidding,
It
yes.
looked like another star. Wait a minute. It looked like another star in the sky, and we watched it as it traveled across the horizon, and then it dropped, and then it low to the horizon, and then it started doing these loop-de-loop swirls.
Yeah, that's weird.
And we tracked it for about 5 minutes before we watched it just go bloop, and it dropped down toward the horizon and disappeared. But it made me think, well, that makes a lot of sense, because if it is a craft and it doesn't really want to be called out, make your craft look like just another star in the sky, and most people aren't going to notice it. But that bright white flash of light at first is what caught my attention. But I don't know. So I've seen something like that. And again, I'm like you. I'm like, I don't know what it was. We watched it for about 5 to 10 minutes. We thought it was weird. It was definitely not a plane.
Right. I mean, I have always been of the opinion that I don't know for sure that there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. I'm just assuming that there has to be.
I would agree.
It's so vast. It seems impossible that there's not, but yeah, I don't. That's the closest that I've had to an experience like that.
That's
And
close
does
enough.
it
That's an encounter.
Did it scare you? Do these ideas?
It was scary, but it was exciting too.
Right. Just like a lot of other things in life.
Have you had any of their experiences post?
No, that was it.
That was it.
That was it. Yeah.
And as we get older, we often we try and we rethink our experiences, and looking back on it, does the experience remain the same, or have you reconfigured it in your mind at all, or?
I haven't. I really haven't. I mean, the weird thing for me is, like, at the time, I felt pretty sure, I saw an unidentified flying object. Now, even though I can still recall the feeling and I can still recall it visually, it feels very fixed in my mind. I can't say, I don't know. But then again, the term unidentified flying object is a big
Unidentified.
umbrella term.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I
And, you know,
I feel comfortable saying that's
Paul,
what I
I
saw.
feel comfortable saying you haven't fully unpacked this experience, and I think you need to deal with it a little bit more. No, but it is funny that some people have these things and then they just kind of brush it off and they go about their life. I mean, I remember hearing a story. A family friend came over. This is during the holidays a couple years ago, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I saw something in the sky once. It was like a big giant skyscraper was just floating through the sky."
Right.
And we were like,
Yeah.
"What?" And she goes, "I just thought it was some new aircraft I was going to hear about on the news the next day."
That's
she goes,
amazing.
"Oh, I watched it tilt."
New aircraft.
And she said it was the
in
size
the shape of a skyscraper.
it was the
is
size
just
of it.
released.
She said she and her like 3-year-old son watched this thing go across the sky, and she didn't think. She just thought, "Wow, that's really cool. What are we going to hear about? What are we going to find out next?"
Wow.
And then a couple days went by and nothing came on it, and that's when she started to go, "Oh, that was weird. I
That
guess
was
that was
weird."
weird." But some people have experiences
Wow.
like that and then just go about their lives and don't question it. Whereas you and me and other people will have experiences, and then it really kind of we talked about
Transformative, yeah.
it changes the whole way you look at the universe.
And you know, Paul, that's so interesting. I mean, that was right around the age when I had an experience, and it really kind of turned me a whole other direction, and towards that paranormal aspect. And it's interesting that the way we go. I actually move back and forth, and as I get older, and I'm moving more towards the skeptic side. Like I really like to have a tight explanation for what's happening. And
Well, yeah, I think also like the older you become, the less you put up with things that aren't explained.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
like, no, I want to know.
Please listen to
didn't-
this podcast. Don't turn it off.
I didn't live this long,
Right.
to have shit be like unclear.
right,
Like what's going on? I demand an explanation.
yeah, basically.
So to recap, UFOs, you're open to it.
100%. Yeah.
Ghosts.
No, I in the way that people have experienced ghosts in every story that I've heard from people that I know to people that, things I'm hearing secondhand, I feel like it's a little too spiritual for me in that I don't think things happen that way. However, I do believe, in energy. I do believe that, it can't be created or destroyed. So I am open to the idea that there is some scientific explanation for all of this. However, I can't, like the idea of unfinished business or,
Yeah.
a haunting,
Well,
like
sure.
a motivation. That is a little too far for me.
Well, I would agree with you. And I think part of the problem is modern day science rebukes investigating the paranormal. And we put so much of the great evidence aside. And, if it was more open and, maybe we could examine it.
I think all of this has a scientific explanation. Some of it might be boring and mundane,
That's
or
right.
some of it is just, there's stuff we don't understand about the quantum field or the way that,
Yeah, Paul touched on it, energy. And listen, I mean, we keep
That-
hearing that word. And
100, 200 years from now, they'll be like, "Oh, they thought that was ghosts." Or actually, they are
right.
ghosts, but they're actually this. They're not a spirit dragging chains around trying to.
yeah, no, I don't believe you're in some like purgatory as a soul or spirit that's
Right.
like hanging around, like haunting your old family members. I remember when I was a kid, they're like, well, when you die, you go to heaven and you'll be with all your family. And I go, that sounds like hell. And I was like, forget that. If that's haunting, I'm out.
But I do think that it is possible that, and this sort of sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but I do think it is possible that if, again, the afterlife, if there is one, could also be explained by science and we just aren't there and will probably never be there. But if it is perhaps just death is a process where you leave one room and go into the other room, you walked through that door to get there, you might be able to walk back into the room you just left.
I love that.
Well, it also gets into what is our concept of time and what does that mean?
Exactly.
What's a
after
man-made
you're-
concept?
Yeah, exactly. So who knows how long that that journey is and how long that how can we measure that threshold? And so who knows what we're seeing? But I also feel it's not to be discounted that there's a lot we still don't know about the human mind. We don't know about the human brain, and we don't know the stuff that we have a limitless capacity to talk ourselves into things, to talk ourselves out of things, to fill in blanks because we got to connect the dots, And so it's like, this emotionally makes sense to me that this plus this equals this.
But by that same token, using your own argument against you, Paul, there might be things in the brain that are receptors for these experiences, like little radio tuners that
Pineal gland.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That we may not realize that we don't understand that either.
That's right.
Which it would be a scientific explanation.
I'll grant you that.
All right,
Well,
okay.
there you go.
And then finally, we got to ask you, just going down the checklist, Bigfoot. Where do you stand with Bigfoot?
He's laughing. I love it.
I don't buy it.
Okay,
I don't buy it.
that's fine.
I really do. As much as space is infinite, I feel like we would have had more concrete evidence of Bigfoot.
They're
by now.
discovering new species every day, Paul.
And I will post about that. That's
many are
true,
Bigfoot?
Michael.
Well, the mountain gorilla wasn't really
How many-
discovered
that's so-
until
how
the
many
turn
are
of the
Bigfoot?
century.
But he was a gorilla.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Bigfoot might be a gorilla. I mean, not a gorilla.
The turn of this century?
Well, Paul, maybe I can.
Okay,
Maybe
fair
I can
enough.
move you more into. I'm a Bigfoot is an interdimensional traveler type thing. So maybe without leaving evidence behind, I can shift.
I told
over
you
there.
guys he was into the weird shit. I told you guys.
Sorry.
All right, so we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have our story of high strangeness of the week. Hi, welcome back to Bigfoot Collectors Club. It's our segment we like to call High Strangeness, where we share a story from paranormal history with our guest. This week, it's my turn. And Paul, I have got, and Bryce, I don't want to discount you. You already kind of know, I
Sure,
think
I
I've
know
tipped
what's
you off
coming.
on what's coming up, but I don't think you're familiar with this story either. It might ring a few bells.
what
but
a
this
scoop.
is one of my favorite UFO, and I'm glad we're talking about UFO today. This is one of my favorite close encounters stories because it is just straight up weird. And it's kind of funny, and it kind of encapsulates everything that I love about the paranormal world.
I can't wait.
This is the Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter, or the Hopkinsville Goblins. So, this is a close encounter of the third kind, so it's categorized as being an alien encounter, although we could have some different opinions on this in our next segment.
Sure.
We'll find out.
Might just be regular goblins.
It might... Exactly.
Yeah.
See, already, just the fact that these things are called goblins.
It's such a tainted word.
Listen, you have to. I wish people would think about them less. It's so diminutive. It's actually. It's an EBE. It's an extraterrestrial biological entity. It's not a goblin. So this took place near Kelly and Hopkinsville, Kentucky, on August 21st, 1955. The people involved were the Sutton and Langford families and their friends, the Taylors. 11 people in total, with 7 adults and 4 kids. Now, this is really also a fun story, too. Just a fun fact. The 62nd anniversary of the story took place on the day of the Great Solar Eclipse this past summer. So there's kind of just a little fun. And there were people, I actually read an article from all places, countryliving.com, that covered that. And that some people were excited that maybe these goblins would come back during the solar eclipse. But actually a really fun article that I never expected to find on Country Living.
Fun article out of Town and Country. Look at that.
So the main players in this story, aside from the goblins, which we'll get to,
Hang on, everyone.
guys, don't fast
Dinner
forward.
first, then dessert.
Okay, we've got Elmer Lucky Sutton and his wife Vera, and they're carnival workers in their early 20s. Their friends Billy Ray Taylor and his wife June, also carnies. Elmer's mother, Glennie Langford, she had a different...
Also tainted. Carnies.
Carnies. Guys, already credibility is out the window.
Oh, no.
You seen them goblins?
Anyway, I got to run to Tilt-A-Whirl. Go get your camera, Bob.
They're Elmer Lucky, who we'll call him Lucky, his mom, Glennie Langford, who was the matriarch of the family, and she had a different last name because she remarried. Her 4 children, Lucky's half-siblings, and then Lucky's brother, J.C. Sutton, and his wife, Arlene, and her brother, O.P. Baker. O.P. Baker.
Names.
I know.
Yes, this is a television show. It's at least one episode of a show. So what happened? August 21st, 1955, in rural Kentucky, the Sutton, Taylor, and Langford families got together to play cards, as one does on a hot summer night.
Sure.
Around 7 p.m., Lucky's buddy, Billy Ray, he wanted to refill his glass of water from the well outside. So he goes outside to refill his glass of water, and he looks up and he sees a giant metallic craft, a disc, shoot across the tree line up in the sky, leaving behind a contrail that he said contained all the colors of the rainbow.
Oh, nice.
So whether or not he got his glass of water, we do not know. But he went back to the house and told everyone at the card game, I just saw the craziest thing outside. Now, Billy Ray and Lucky Renaud play a lot of pranks on one another. And so everybody went, shut up, you're yanking our chain. And they could tell he was actually really freaked out by it and didn't let it go. So Lucky says to Billy Ray, well, it's probably just a meteor, but let's go out and take a look. So they go outside while everybody else is in the house. And unfortunately, Billy Ray's story turned out to have some veracity to it, because emerging from the trees, Billy Ray and Lucky saw a 3-foot-tall creature. He was described to be all silver, with tiny atrophied legs, with long arms that contained 3 claws on each hand. They looked like talons.
Oh.
And the creature was walking towards them with his arms raised up, and they couldn't tell if it was a sort of, I'm peaceful, or if it was coming to scratch their faces off.
Right. Or like a bear does, make themselves taller.
And
I'm a 3-foot alien, now I'm 4.
Yeah, the creature had big ears and round, glowing yellow eyes.
Wow.
And instead of walking, they said that it floated towards them. It hovered towards them. Now, when you look at drawings of these creatures, and I'm going to pass around, so Paul, these are the eyewitness drawings of what the creatures looked like. They're sort of reminiscent of the Gremlins from the 1980s film.
Those haunted my nightmares, by the way. Out of one thing, the Gremlins, that movie haunted me for so long. I used to picture Stripe coming into my dad's window and like scratching me from under the bed. The way they left that movie, it might just be the lights, but be sure to check under the bed. And I'm like, oh!
Yeah, so I actually think that the Gremlins or the Kentucky Goblins were they influenced is it Critters and Gremlins?
Oh, yeah.
I think so. This is kind of one of those fun little stories that even like Steven Spielberg knew because he was into this stuff. So it's influenced a lot of the Alien movies that have come out. So before we go any further, we've seen this creature. It's important to note 2 things. Number 1, Hopkinsville, I cannot say this word, Hopkinsville sits on the 37th parallel north, which has been called the Extraterrestrial Highway by author Ben Mesrich, a.k.a. the Mulder of El Paso.
Yeah.
The what? Oh, the Mulder. Okay.
The Mulder of El Paso. He's a paranormal investigator out of El Paso. That's my favorite title of all time.
It's probably his, too.
Yeah, of course.
They call me the Mulder.
No doubt.
Of El Paso. Now, according to Mesrich, in his book, The 37th Parallel, which I did not know about until I started researching this story, and I immediately ordered on Amazon. It's arriving tomorrow. I can't wait. Cities and towns along this line have experienced an abundance of UFO sightings and high strangeness, alien encounters. I think there's even like a fabled UFO crash that took place along the 37 North Parallel. And that's, just remember that, because we're gonna get back to it in a little bit.
Yeah.
The other thing that you want to remember, or another thing that I think is important about this story, is that a neighbor of Glennie's farmhouse corroborated later, saying that they actually saw strange lights in the woods, and at the time just figured the guys were out trying to find some hogs that got loose, because apparently that was something that happened.
God, Mike. I mean, pepper us with that.
I know.
So good.
And later the neighbors told the police that she did hear gunshots that were going to follow, and she thought that they were trying to fend off a big cat or some type of predator on the property, because they're out in the Kentucky
for sure.
wilderness. This is 1955, so it's very, very rural. So back to Lucky and Billy Ray. They run back into the house. And they tell the family what they just saw. Now, Glennie, still thinking it's a prank, she starts getting annoyed because they're scaring the kids. And Billy Ray and Lucky get out the guns. They get their 12 gauge and their 22, and they are like freaking the fuck out.
Shit's
Everybody
going
hit
down.
the floor. So not long after that, Glennie actually, and they start to hunker down and they're checking windows and doors. And Glennie looks over the mom and she sees through the doorway one of these creatures, the creature standing on the porch, and she screams.
Wow.
And so she sees it first, and Billy Ray fires at it, and it backflips and rolls away. It does this little weird. I mean, this
Right.
is, and then when we talk about high strangeness, one of the things I love about these stories is the cartoonish things that tend to happen in these things that are so comical,
Right.
and it immediately
hard to
lends to
explain.
discrediting your
Yes.
story. And that's where that term, that high strangeness quality, comes to, because some of this stuff is so surreal when it happens.
Also, everybody's name and occupation.
Yes. So
Not helping.
the goblin rolls away. Billy Ray runs out into the porch to go get him. And June, his wife, sees another creature on the roof climbing down from the awning, and its clawed hand is reaching for what I can only assume is Billy Ray's rockabilly hairdo.
Wow.
And she yanks him back. She says, "Get back in the house." She yanks him back in. Lucky goes out with the 12 gauge, fires at the thing, and it jumps away off the roof.
Wow.
So
That's the one picture that
yes,
you see
there's a
of
picture
the
that we'll
alien-
put up
the
of the
goblin
alien
reaching.
reaching for
You're right,
Billy Ray's
Paul.
head.
Oh my God, you're right.
So he goes off. That one off the roof takes off into the woods. Now, not shortly after that, either the first or the second goblin reappears at one of the windows, and JC, he's now got his gun. This is Lucky's brother. He fires at it through the window, and it too. They keep missing it, or it seems the bullets don't affect it. It takes off.
Wow.
So everybody's freaking out. They tell the women to get the children and hide out in one of the bedrooms, and the men are going to go outside and hunt these things down. Glennie says, "No, not without me, you don't." She goes out with the boys, and she's a very religious woman, and she thinks that these might be demons sent by Satan himself to come test their faith and scare them. So she's like, "I'm going to go confront this devil on my own.
Praise Jesus.
We're with you guys. I'm not standing behind, hiding with the women and children." So they go out there. They spot one of the creatures. Now, they say later there was anywhere from 2 to 4. Some of the stories exaggerate that number, but Glennie always stuck to it. She said, "We never saw more than 2 together at the same time, but they were appearing around the house and hearing sounds that it indicated there could have been as many as 4.
Seems to be important to her.
So they see one in a maple tree. They shoot at the one in the maple tree, and they hear what sounds like a metallic sound, like one of the guys described it's like when you fire a bullet at a metal bucket. And the thing rolled off the tree, then floated to the ground, and then took off. Then they saw another one hop up on top of a barrel, and I think it was Billy Ray. He got point blank range, shot this thing, and heard the bullet ricochet off the creature. It too rolled up into a little ball and bounced off.
Ricochet metallic as well?
Metallic sound.
Gotcha.
So everybody's freaking out at this point. And they said that the closer they would get to them, or the gunshots or the sounds would make the creatures glow, and their eyes glow brighter, this greenish yellow light. So they decide, they get back into the house, and they decide, we can't do this. Like a few hours have passed, and they go, "We're going into town. We're going to the cops."
I need coffee.
So they go to exactly. They go into and Billy Ray never got his water either. It's still sitting out there on the well.
His well water.
Yeah, his well water.
What's he
So
doing?
they go
Should
into.
have filled a bucket.
I mean, come on.
Seems a little bit more
Why are you
efficient.
going to the well for a glass?
One
of
glass,
water?
a refill. A refill.
We don't know how they did things back then.
While I'm
Paul.
up, can I get anybody anything from the well?
So
give me y'all's glasses.
Give me y'all's glasses.
I'm going out to the well.
I'll fill y'all's up. Sorry.
So they drive into town, and they tell the police chief, they go into Hopkinsville, and the police chief knows this family. And they know that they are not one to ever get the authorities involved in their business whatsoever. So they are, if he's
Enough
like, if they
said.
are telling me this, then something, I don't know what, but something's going on up at the farm, and we're going to go check it out. He actually also radios over to a nearby nearby Army base, and the Army base sends military police out to the farm as well.
Here's where it gets good.
And as they're driving back to the property, the cops did say, and the family saw again 2 more streaks of light shoot across the sky.
Mm-hmm.
They get back to the farm. The cops are searching. Military police are there. They don't find anything. They see a bunch of shell casings around where the rounds had been fired, but no sign of the goblins, no sign of the creatures. They did say that they found a puddle of strange substance that shimmered at certain angles. Could have just been well water, but some people think it might have been fluid or blood from one of the gunshots on these creatures. Now, why they didn't bottle it up and go test it, I don't know. But that's just one of the colors of the story. So finally, the cops and the military police were like, I don't know, something happened here. We understand you're all scared, but we can't do anything. So 2 a.m., they leave. And the family decides to settle down and like, let's just try to get some sleep. 2:30 in the morning, old Glennie's trying to tuck herself in. She looks up, and this thing, there's one staring at her in the window. Now, she's kind of gotten to the point where she's now moved on. I think the time she got to town, she was thinking about it. It occurred to her that these things hadn't actually tried to attack them. So she went, well, maybe they're benevolent. Maybe they aren't demons. Maybe we should stop just shooting at them relentlessly.
I love that.
So she calls her son Lucky in, and she goes, Lucky, I got another one, but don't shoot. Don't shoot. He kicks down the door, fires at that thing, point blank range, it disappears.
Lucky.
Now, for the rest of the night, things calm down a little
Lucky.
bit.
Lucky shoots.
Lucky
shoots first, ask questions later.
Exactly. And they said for the rest of the night, they had occasional sounds and a couple of them poking their heads in the windows. But by dawn, the siege had ended.
Right.
And the story got printed in the paper the next day because when the cops and the military police went, one of the local reporters went with them and took photos. And you can actually see the newspaper reports of like the cops pointing at the roof and, around the farmhouse. And the story got exaggerated. They said there were 12 creatures. They said the little green men had invaded a Kentucky farmhouse. And Glennie was pissed because she goes, there were no more than 4.
Fake news.
And she was, this is absolutely fake news. And she was pissed about that they were blowing the story out of proportion. It's already crazy. And she said, and they weren't green, they were silver and gray. So she was pissed. And then the story caught on. And the farmhouse became a hot spot for looky-loos and flying saucer nuts. And eventually, she had to leave the farm. She couldn't take it anymore, and she bought an apartment in town. So there's a happy ending for Glennie.
All right.
But still, I mean, it's a shame when a carny matriarch is driven from her home.
That's the tragedy.
It's the saddest thing.
It is.
It's the saddest thing.
Well, and there was a radio DJ who had read the story, a local DJ, and he went, well, there's something here. And he kind of felt the fake news of it and that the paper wasn't taking the story too seriously. So before she was, had to leave her home, this is within the week of the incident, he drove out to the house and he goes, okay, I take this seriously, and he did an interview with them, and he made them all draw what they saw separately, and those are these drawings that I'm passing around. And if you note,
That's a triangulation
first of all,
of
these
evidence.
carnies are pretty good artists,
Right?
And second, despite some minor details, they are very consistent. One of the women said, no, their waists were thicker and they were a little bit bulkier, and Billy Ray insisted that at least one of them had little antennae.
Yeah.
So he drew that onto his picture, but they all are roughly the same size.
I've never
the same
seen those
shape,
before.
with these kind of like wide gremlin bat ears. So one thing to tack onto this.
One of them is like ripped.
Yeah, one of them. I think that's the women. The women.
He had these beautiful abs.
Yeah, June was like,
I
he
believe
was
his
sexy.
pectorals were they were just nice.
Okay, so that is the end of the Kentucky Goblin incident. However, it might not be the whole story. Because that same night, an hour and 7 minutes north of Hopkinsville, outside Evansville, Indiana, there were 2 women that took a swim in the Ohio River. This is August 21st, 1955. And Mrs. Darwin Johnson and Mrs. Chris Limble, both of them have masculine names, which I'd just like to point out is fun.
Well, that's Are they referring to their husbands?
Maybe that's true.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah,
sense. Now, Paul, this is why I have you on to teach me about gentlemanly ways. So let's call them Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Limble, because I could not find their first names. Mrs. Johnson claims she was swimming when she was suddenly clutched by a 3-clawed hand that dragged her underwater. Twice, as her friend, Mrs. Nibble, just stood on the shore and screamed and tried to holler for help, but nobody was around. Mrs. Johnson managed to get herself away, and when they looked at her leg, there was a small 3-clawed hand mark that had imprinted itself and cut her leg. Now, a lot of cryptozoologists say this sounds a lot like the Loveland frog monster.
The Loveland frog monster, yeah.
The Loveland frogman.
Loveland frogman.
And the Thetis lake monster. But I pointed out for a couple reasons. One is that this took place on the exact same night, just over an hour north of Hopkinsville. 2, the description of the 3-clawed hand is very similar to the Kentucky hobgoblins. Or goblins. I like to call them hobgoblins. And then 3, Evansville is also right along the 37th parallel north line, latitude line, or longitude runs north, and that Hopkinsville is.
You think it's like taking your dad's Mustang out for the night? Let's go screw around Hopkinsville. Let's for a night. Let's just fuck around.
I don't necessarily think they're related, but you can't help but point out.
No, it's a great connection,
it's
Mike.
worth mentioning. And so it's just something else to think about.
Yeah.
And I will say there's a little bit of a teaser to perhaps a future episode if Paul comes back on the show. I did a little more digging. We don't have time for it today, but in 2015, it's possible that the goblins returned.
Oh,
What?
yeah.
And so if you ever come back on the show, we're going to do the sequel to the Kentucky Goblins. And I did a little looking into it, and it gets weird.
Ooh. All right.
Weird.
That's
It involves
great.
some caves and some military bases.
Caves again.
They're the caves. So that's the Kentucky Goblin incident.
That was wonderful.
All right, great.
a great
When we
story.
come back, we're going to ask Paul, what the hell was that? Hi, welcome back to Bigfoot Collectors Club, and now it's time for What the hell was that? So, Paul, you brought up a good point in the break, but I'd like to ask you, based on the story you just heard, what the hell was that?
Man, this is a tough one because it's got so many people that are claiming the same thing. The description of the creatures is like you can't point to any existing animal that we already have on Earth and say, oh, it's one of these. You know.
Well, I'm gonna say one skeptic's theory was that the creatures had actually been monkeys that they stole from the carnival and painted with glow-in-the-dark paint, which I think is less credible than the actual story we heard.
Yeah, that's so. I love what they come up with because that's just crap.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know much about mass hallucinations or things like that. I mean, it seems like this. I don't know, but then the fact that it's a whole family, like everybody,
3 generations,
three
basically.
generations, yeah. That I don't know.
And their story was, and I think this is worth pointing out, over time, because of the fake news element of the why am I using that expression? But because the news story was sort of outlandish, the rumors spread and the story got embellished, but the family was always consistent. They never
That's so
changed. They
important.
because they came back and would interview them for books and UFO books, and they were very angry that the story got even crazier than it actually was.
Right.
Well, because the details are strange enough. They don't need exaggeration.
You don't need 15 of these things when you've already got one.
I mean, a hobgoblin backflipping after you shoot it, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Why
exactly.
would people exaggerate it?
Right,
Do you know what I
right,
mean?
right.
People get things wrong.
Yeah, people
and,
get things wrong. They're like, I heard there's 15 creatures up there. Let's go on.
and it's
take a
also
look.
telephone. It's just like people. It gets the more the story passes, the more people are trying to. Again, people are trying to piece together. This is, and then I think this happened.
But even that's to even more point. When you see something so crazy, and even our stories, Mike's and mine, the things we've experienced, and you just shared it with us today, we go back to that place in time and we remember. The details are there, how we felt, just like the experience.
Yeah.
It's all remained so vivid. And I think those details are supposed to be, intact, and that's probably why old Granny wanted to preserve them.
Right. The only thing I can think is that some other more mundane, horrible thing happened, and this was their cover story.
That's good.
Right.
That's good.
Like,
No,
here's
I
what
mean-
we tell everybody.
Yeah.
But what the hell
shots
was
are fired.
that?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, what? God, that's dark. That's really dark.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, in the military too. See, because when you start to get
There is it is important noticing in a lot of these UFO stories happen in and around military
Well, that's
bases.
right. When you start to get the police involved and then the military involved as well, then you get the evidence starts to mount and the witness reports start to become more credible.
Yeah.
And my favorite UFO reports are the ones from airline pilots, commercial ones, military. Those
and
are the
astronauts
ones
too.
Yeah, Edgar Mitchell, Buzz Aldrin. Yeah, they've all seen them.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, those are the ones that are hard to refute.
But it gets into which way does your paranoia go? So is your paranoia that
This is a good point.
there's things out there that the government won't tell us, or these things are the government? It's like any
a little
kind
from
of
column A, a little bit from column B.
Yeah. So any kind of strange craft you might see, is that an earthly thing that we're not supposed to know about?
Paul, you've stumbled right onto it. I mean, you've divided the class of where people are in UFO lore. Are these things coming from an extraterrestrial place? Are these things coming from us, our own human civilization, recreating them from technology we've garnered?
Well, and there's a whole conspiracy theory that it's so much the government
Yeah.
that they're going to actually stage a fake alien
a fake
invasion
alien war. That's right.
to get everybody to sign up for a one world government,
Yeah,
which that's just stolen from the end of Watchmen.
Well,
by the way.
there's a great author, Stephen Greer, who presents a pretty outstanding
I know,
case.
but that guy, come on. I don't know.
that
This
guy,
guy. I mean, I get it. And listen, Stephen,
love
if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the show.
Sure.
But I don't know. It always, some of this stuff,
It's a lot.
it goes to a point where then it delves into the alt-right.
That's right.
And it delves into the Alex Jones stuff of the world. And I go, that's where you're losing me
Mm-hmm.
here. Now, I tend to think like Paul that there probably is a lot of craft that the government doesn't want us to know about because it's top secret. It's like the stealth bomber.
We've been doing it for 100 years.
Exactly. And some of the stuff may have been fitted and made from backwards technology from crash stuff that happened at Roswell. I don't know. But I think my theory is that the government knows they're not saying anything for one big reason, which is one of the main purposes of a federal government especially is to protect the nation from invaders. And if there is something out there that they know they can't tell their citizens, they can't tell
Put the lid on.
They can't tell us. So if they came out, the government said, okay, aliens exist. The first question is, okay, can they hurt us? Can they invade us?
Yeah. What are we going to do about it?
And the government's like, yeah, okay, what are you doing to protect us from that? We can't, because they are so far advanced. If they wanted to, they could wipe us out like that. And then it's
You
not
just
about
said
the,
what
it's
so
not,
many people
it's
won't say,
not
really.
about it's not about the religion. Oh my God, people say, well, then everyone freak out. It's not about that. It's the government basically admitting that it is instantly
Helpless.
irrelevant.
Right.
And that's why they keep a lid on it. And also, I would think that they probably keep a lid on it because whatever's going on, they figure they're probably not going to invade us, just the way that we won't invade an ant colony or a group of chimpanzees.
If they wanted to enslave us, they would have done that by now, because
And some people would say they already
could very easily do
have.
it.
But if this is, I don't know. But that's kind of where I think it. And there could be obviously multiple types of aliens that some do want to come here and blow us away Independence Day style. But that's why I think the government will never say anything, because they are immediately irrelevant.
That's a great argument.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, well, that's a good place to end.
You also agree.
I also agree with myself. Riley, you agree? Nods and thumbs up from Riley.
That's 4.
So we're going to wrap up that segment, and we're going to come back for our little collector's corner. We'll be right back.
Great.
Welcome back to BCC. It's time for the collector's corner, which Paul just pointed out.
It's three. Bigfoot Collectors Club is 3/4 Bigfoot Club. one quarter collectors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
That's
spent a
it.
long
That's
time.
it. That
Yeah.
is a long time. Well, you know, Bryce and I, we've worked together on a couple projects, and then we also discovered not only were we into this stuff, but we found out that we both collect like comics and action figures and stuff. And Bryce was saying, we got to find a way to weave that into the show. And
I was ready to do a whole podcast on toys.
He just wanted to do it.
I was just like, you know.
that just sounded expensive to me.
Right.
So I went, you know what? Let's call it Bigfoot Collectors Club because we're collecting all these stories. And then we'll have a little segment at the end as kind of a little palate cleanser where we can share some stuff.
Sure.
So being, as it is, called the Collectors Club, Paul, did you ever collect anything?
When I was a kid, I had a beer can collection.
Awesome.
Schlitz?
Everything.
Oh.
It was the idea was to try to get as many different varieties of beer can as possible.
No.
When you were a kid?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
When I was a kid, my dad used to buy different beers so that, you know, it was me and my brother kind of curated this collection.
That's amazing.
And
How did you display it? This is important.
there were these plastic, they were really flimsy, these plastic display cases is very generous.
Oh, no.
I think the idea was that they were kind of frames, and you could hang them on the wall, and you would put the can behind like an elastic band. And they were pretty shitty. But also the cans that we had for a beer can to be valuable, I don't know what kind of condition it's supposed to be in. I don't know if it's like gotta
Undrunk?
be
Yeah.
if it's got to be like a full beer, or if
Right.
it's got to be like the can is it's like just an empty
And
sealed
some of those
can.
things explode. I had a Pepsi can from episode 1 when Star Wars came out, and it ultimately just exploded.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I should probably empty
You
that.
know, I would do that to my old dad, 6 cans. I'd pull out one and then like save it, like an old RC Cola. I'd like, I
What
like-
was your favorite can?
The generic. That was like the holy grail. was
What's that?
The white can
Oh.
with just black lettering that said beer.
Oh,
That
wow.
actually
It was
exists?
blue lettering, I think.
That actually
It
existed?
did, yeah. It might
Wow.
still. I'm not sure,
Wow.
but yeah, that generic thing, that was like the early '80s, mid '80s, early '80s,
Wow.
where there was a whole line of generic products that was just white packaging with blue lettering that said what
man.
it was.
Yeah.
I'm going to look that up. We'll put that on the Instagram.
That one took a long time to find.
Bryce, did you have anything to share today?
No, I think
I did bring something. Now,
Great.
I mentioned I'm a comic book geek, as
Yes.
most people who know me know.
Oh, I love
and
these.
This is part of my research for today's story. Came from one of my all-time favorite series, the Paradox Press Big Books of. And this is the Big Book of the Unexplained.
Yeah.
And they actually have a segment in it, a comic in it, of the Goblin incident.
oh, cool.
The encounter, which is really, really fun. And they play up the comedy of it, of course.
I think I must have read this one because I read all of these.
Yeah, you could actually play this guy
These are
who's
great.
the host. I can't remember who he is, but look at him. You could pull that
Yeah, okay.
off.
All right.
Well, I mean,
He's
that-
in.
He's in, but
It's not
they
the
have.
most flattering
I
picture to be
pointed, to
called.
the wrong, I pointed to the wrong.
No, there's a more handsome version.
Yeah.
He's not in. He's not in.
Look,
You lost him.
there. He's quite handsome
Oh,
in
he's,
that
he's
one.
much more.
Yeah.
It's a much more flattering
Look at him,
angle
this guy.
that he was drawn at.
It's not the goblin.
I basically pointed at like a fat Monopoly man.
Oh, God.
And said, you can play him, Paul. No, but he's got a suit and he's got a mustache
got
and
a
dark
suit.
hair. But anyway, they had I love this series. There's the Bigfoot, the Big Book of the Weird West, which is an awesome
That's a great
It's
one.
got the weirdest stuff.
That's a
And there's
great
like, what is it, like convicts and the unexplained
Vigilantes.
vigilantes.
Yeah.
That's so good. So they're out of print now, but I think you can still find them in used bookstores. Go out and find the Paradox Press Big Book of series. So that's what I brought in to share today.
That's cool.
And before we go, I want to thank Paul for coming in and being part of the show. This
Me
was
too.
so
Thank
much
you,
fun.
Paul.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm glad I'm like just happy we have a podcast now so we can bring in people like Mr. PFT here.
Yeah.
Before we go, where can people find you?
I'm PF Tompkins on all the socials, PFTOMPKINS. And I have a podcast myself called Spontaneation.
Which I've been on.
That's right. You were one of our earliest
Yeah,
guests.
that's
actually.
why I'm returning the favor.
That's right. And thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Comes out every Monday, the usual podcast places.
And it's great. Please
Thank
listen
you.
to that. And anything else you want to plug before you go? Anything? interesting?
I don't know. I'll be in January. I'll be at San Francisco
Great.
Sketch Fest.
This will go up December 4th, I believe. around
Tickets
there,
are on sale now. I'm doing a bunch of shows up there. Sketchfest in San Francisco is fantastic. If you are in that area, or if you want to like make a trip and fly up or drive up, it's a great festival. with tons of great shows, and I'm doing a bunch the first weekend of the festival. But you can go to paulftompkins.com/live.
Awesome, thank you.
Great.
Bryce, anything?
No, email us your crazy and weird stories or comment on the ones that we've shared.
We want your stories because we're going to start doing listener files. And I already know some people I've said, oh, you got to send that into the show. So it's BigfootCollectorsClub@gmail.com. Send us your stories. We'll read them on the air. We'll do a special episode every now and then where we just do listener mail. Find us on social media at Bigfoot Collectors Club. And then you can find Bryce on Instagram
at Mr. Bryce Johnson.
And I'm at McMills on everything. 2 Z's at the end of that. Thank you so much for listening. Big shout out to Riley for doing our sound. And I want to thank, as always, Suneaters for providing our music from the song Come Alone, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Thanks so much.
Thanks. You want to take a shot at Bigfoot? Yeah.